Welcome back, guys. Very happy to have with me today Mark and Miha from EntryPoint. And it's a really exciting time to be chatting to these guys because they've been working on fine-tuning models for some time now. And with the recent changes with GPTs coming forward, it sort of brings the boundary of what's possible with GPTs to light and kind of shines a light on what these guys are doing. So anyway, guys, very nice to meet you. It'd be great if you could just give us a quick introduction to yourselves, please. Maybe Mark, if you go ahead.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here, Tim. Yeah, so I'm a serial entrepreneur. My biggest success has been creating the Simple Booth app, which is a photo booth app for iPad that millions of people have used to take selfies. And since December, I've been working with Miha on EntryPoint, which is the fine-tuning platform for large language models. And it's been really fun and exciting to get into this space and learn all about it and create a tool that people can use to actually customize and train large language models.
You, Miha.
Yeah, my name is Miha. I have been running a SaaS marketing agency for the past 3 years, 3 to 4 years, where I kind of invented this marketing approach called comparative content marketing, where we help SaaS companies essentially create more demand for their tool by leveraging the popularity of larger companies, right? So that's what I've been doing. And yeah, since December last year, I've been working with Mark on EntryPoint, this project, and I have been my primary responsibility. So Mark is the coder and I am the mouthpiece, I suppose. I've been hosting masterclasses, teaching people how to do the fine tuning and also other things. And yeah, writing stuff and so on.
Fantastic. So I'd love to get a really sort of basic explanation of fine tuning, what it is, and kind of why it's different to GPTs, because I think that's what everyone will be thinking.
So the way to think about fine tuning in the simplest terms is show, not tell. So we're all used to telling ChatGPT what we want. With fine tuning, you're actually bringing in examples and then you're showing the model how it should behave, how it should think and interpret data, and how it should write. And you can do this by telling with prompt engineering, and it's called few-shot learning, where you include examples in your prompt of what you want the model to do. And that's really powerful. But there's only so many models you can include in a prompt because of the context window. And that's changed to an extent because the context window gets really long. However, even with long context windows, the model doesn't pay attention to everything you give it. Just like humans, it pays more attention to things at the beginning and the end and kind of ignores things in the middle, which I guess isn't terribly surprising since it's been trained on human data. So knowing that, even if you start increasing the number of examples you give it in few-shot learning with this huge context window, they're not all going to take, so because it's using the attention mechanism in the prompt to like decide what's important to keep generating tokens. With fine tuning, you're really baking those examples into the model. There's no limit. You can have hundreds, thousands, millions of examples to continue to improve the performance of the model. And you can bring in your real examples and you can get really solid outputs. So I think that, we're all kind of familiar with, or maybe we've heard of instruction tuning, which is this thing that the big AI companies have done to these base models. So they train a base model on a bunch of internet data, just huge bunch of text, and there's no kind of right answer. It just feeds in the text and then it figures out like, oh, based on some of the context, like this token is the right token here, or the token is like a word or a set of characters. And so it's like, this word is the right word here. And then it just kind of learns language. And then they do instruction tuning, which takes kind of input-output pairs. Like, hey, I want you to do this. And it's like, oh, I'd love to do that for you. Here you go. Here's the answers that you wanted. Here's your ideas. And so models are instruction tuned into this sort of generic foundation model that can do a lot of things pretty well in kind of like a style and tone based on the instruction tuning data set, like however that was constructed, however it was worded, and how long the paragraphs were and how wordy the answers were. And we get these really cool results, like Chat GPT. But what we think is there's a ton of applications for fine tuning beyond instruction tuning. Businesses have millions of specialized use cases they could apply models to. And bigger isn't always better. So to get these really powerful like Chat GPT 4 models, you just need a huge number of parameters, and you need like a lot of GPUs, big GPUs, consumes a ton of energy. It's slow. There's ways to optimize it, of course, like GPT-4 Turbo. But long term, bigger isn't always better. It's like I'm not using all of those parameters to like qualify a sales lead. I'm using a very small subset, and I can create a really efficient fine-tuned model that does that really well, and it's cheaper, faster, and more performant. So
that's it's interesting what you say about with these longer prompts, longer entries, that the bit in the middle gets ignored. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that was true. But the way I've written prompts is I tend to put the important stuff at the beginning and end. I guess just because it seemed to work better. But I didn't realize it actually was a reason why. And so that's really insightful. I love the show, not tell. So with fine tuning, it sounds like it's a bit like a mini training more than. Would that be a good way of trying to understand it? The model's trained, but you're kind of just training it a bit extra to give it precisely what you want with this fine tuning.
Exactly.
Okay. And so the use cases, it'd be great to understand where you think the GPTs kind of finish and where fine tuning takes over.
So perhaps a analogy before we go into that question, because one of the common misconceptions is, hey, if I want to train my own large language model, I would have to spend so much money, create so many examples, like millions of examples, right? But that's actually not true, because we're not creating a large language model from scratch. We're just training that additional layer, adding that additional layer on top of it. So it's kind of like, the society training a lot of college graduates, right, for like 15 years. And then a company hiring one of those graduates and just giving it like, some training that, like a mentor and some, internal training. And in like 1 or 2 years, the person will become an expert in that narrow field, right? So it's kind of like that. A company does not need to, train a person from a young age. Just takes over after the education system finishes, essentially, right? So it's kind of like that. We can see results from fine tuning, training the models after like 10, 20 examples already, right? It doesn't take like thousands of examples to see a meaningful result.
And those 10 or 20 examples, if you put those in a prompt, would you get a worse result than if you fine tune a model?
Haven't specifically tested that. But if you are using GPT-4 and you have some instructions and then like 10 or 20 few shot examples, I would say that would be on par, if not slightly better than your fine-tuned model, which would usually be let's say in terms of OpenAI, would be like a 3.5 turbo, fine-tuned, right? So yeah, let's say the quality would likely be the same, plus minus 10%. But the cool thing that you have just did is you have elevated the quality of 3.5 essentially, right, to the level of GPT-4 on that specialized task. So you can have all the benefits of, a cheaper, faster model with faster response times, but still have the same quality as a stronger model.
Right.
If you're going to be reusing the model over and over again, you're basically freeing up space in your prompt. So you don't even have to include those examples every time. I think this is really important for automations or for products where there's a feature that uses large language models and it's going to be run over and over again, maybe thousands or millions of times. Like, do you really want to just spend money on those tokens every single time? And then the training data set also kind of provides this layer for your team to work on. So with a prompt, I like to explain it as you have a GitHub repo and you have a project, and it's like, okay, you just have one file, and you have your programmers all sharing the same file and trying to improve the code in that file, and they just keep running into each other. That's like
Right.
having one epic prompt, right? It's like, how do you work on that as a team? How do you like tweak a word? Is that just, okay, there's one person on your team responsible for this one prompt that runs this really important
I got
feature?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, with the training data set, now it's spread out. You have these different examples, and you can improve each example, or add examples to cover different edge cases, instead of continuously extending that prompt and waiting for it to get longer and longer. So it's just a better workflow
Yeah.
too. Once you get to that level.
So, and on a very small, on a very small example, so in my small team, we create prompts together, and we brainstorm different outcome scenarios and so on, and then we try and manage that prompt, and we do trip over each other because members of my team will find a use case and they'll put it in, it will kind of trigger something else, and we break keep things and so on. So I can see having one database that you build together that doesn't one thing overrule something else, or it makes sense. Yeah.
When you are creating GPTs, when you're using ChatGPT, you are writing instructions for the GPT to kind of crystallize on one point, its intuition. But with fine tuning, you're storing your intuition, right? You're not directing its intuition, you're storing your intuition and then reusing it. So that's, I think, the big distinction. Also, with GPTs, like what we just recently, so last week, we had another masterclass, and one of the attendees, he developed like a bunch of different prompts, like 75 very specialized prompts. And the way he wanted to use them, he wanted to have a central chatbot, and where this specific use case was like made for writers that would engage with this GPT essentially, and it would help them write the story. But that's a huge task. It's like, hey, we have to write a plot, we have to create characters, we have to develop the world. It's lots of different subtasks, right? So what we kind of came up together, it's like, hey, you can create a GPT that retains GPTs for general knowledge of how to act as essentially like kind of like a doctor, right? Like a hub. People engage with that, and we can add custom actions that actually call our fine-tuned models through the API, right? So we can use a GPT, as a how would you call it?
Like a router.
Yeah, essentially, right? And then call our specialized models that you can create with, let's say, EntryPoint, right? That are fine-tuned on one specific task and know how to do that really, really well.
Is it possible to call those fine-tuned models in, for example, in Zapier Flow? Could you, through the OpenAI API, Zapier integration, can you then find your fine-tuned model?
Yep. In the masterclass, I show a few of pretty cool models, like I actually show like how to use the model in Slack. I mean, I show how to do the integration. I mean, how to do the automation in Zapier, and then I demonstrate like, hey,
Okay.
when we talk with in a Slack channel, like we're actually calling our fine-tuned model.
So those use cases that you can use millions of times, what sort of things would those be? That needed to be used millions of times or thousands of times. So you need the cost saving.
Mm-hmm. Well, like, we have a client who's generating websites with AI, and I'm working with them on how to generate code and which models have the best performance and how large their data set needs to be. And so, let's say you're taking some kind of description of a website, and then you're trying to generate a whole website, and maybe you're generating it in sections, and like you have a fine-tuned model that generates the header and the footer, and a different model that generates like the interior content, and that type of stuff. Websites can get pretty large. There can be multiple pages. You could be running like tens of prompts just for one website. and then you scale that to thousands or tens of thousands of customers, or they're making tweaks to some copy in the website, and it's all based on really plain instructions. It's not necessarily a chatbot, right? But it's like, hey,
Yeah.
I want this section to be more about something, and then it performed the action. That's an example. There's also like the way that companies are building products with large language models. There are a ton of calls to the large language model. It's not just one call and then you take that input and you're happy with it. It's like, okay, we got this input back. Now we're going to have the model review it before we return it to the end user. Or there's like a safety check, like check this for anything objectionable that we don't actually want to return. And like a lot of those calls to the LLM could be fine-tuned models. You could have a fine-tuned model that like just reviews text for safety, or for you could tag. One use case I really like with my company Simple Booth, because we have a lot of photo galleries from events, full of photos, and they have like a hashtag and a title. I created a model that tags the content. So it's like, this gallery is a wedding, this gallery is a holiday party, this gallery is like a store grand opening or retail or something like that. So you could, there's so much content on the internet. You could use an LLM to tag your content for you automatically. Once you get into it, I think there's so many use cases.
Yeah. That makes the website example I love as well, because you see these GPTs where it creates a website for you, but it does, but it's not a website you can use because it's not being created. You haven't given it enough specification, and it goes off on a tangent. I can definitely see if you've got, say, 20 different prompts that give you exactly the parts you need, it could get a much better output.
And using the frameworks that you want to use and like the styling and the types of, yeah.
What use cases really excite you?
Personally, I love using it to generate content in my style and tone. I have another model I fine-tuned for Simple Booth that's a blog generator I can show you in a bit. It just takes some really rough notes and it writes a blog article in our style, because I tried to use ChatGPT for, like many of us, to write blogs. And what I found was that it's so sensitive to my instructions in the prompt that if I change one little word, it's like, hey, I want like I found ChatGPT 4 to write really long paragraphs.
Yeah.
And I don't like writing like 6 to 7 sentence paragraphs. Mine are like 2 to 3 sentences. But if I say write short paragraphs, it makes them too short. So like it kind of oversteers or overcorrects.
Yeah.
And I had a hard time converting my style into instructions. Like if you write in a certain style, it's sometimes hard to describe how you do it. It's just something you know through experience. It's your intuition. And by creating a data set of your past writing, you can teach that intuition to the model, instead of having to figure out how to explain it in just the right perfect little words. So I think that's really cool. I'm actually working on a personal project where, so every time now that I have to do something on Slack, like a team member asks me for something, I started copying it into my fine-tuned data set. And my end goal is to fine-tune a model that will just like act like me. I don't know if that'll work yet, but that's
fine-tune Mark.
Well, yeah, it's called Everything Like Mark.
Everything like Mark. Just ask Mark.
Yeah. We'll see how that turns out.
That sounds, yeah. I think the writing one's interesting because I use GPT-4 all the time for writing my newsletter. And I use it for ideation. I use it to try and generate stories that link things together. I use it to try and work out the bits that I think will be interesting to trigger people's interest. But I haven't been able to crack the final edit where it puts things in the language that I want and the formatting I want. And I've tried so many prompts. I haven't cracked it. So I think that's a great use case.
The problem with that is, as we said at the beginning, right? So the way these large language models are trained is they are fed like a lot of text essentially. And the model then finds patterns of, okay, so if we have this word, that word should be followed by this word and so on, like, or syllables, tokens, you can think about it that way. And that's really a fundamental quality of the model, of the large language model. So even if in your prompt you say, hey, write in this writing style, or hey, like copy the style that I have pasted you in perhaps in the few short examples below, right? It won't be able to do that effectively. But what I've been experimenting the past week is for example, if I create so what I did is I found a writer that has very distinct writing style. In this case, it's Gary Halbert, the copywriter, right? It has very like conversational writing style. And I started like taking like sentences and paragraphs and just adding those into a project, right? As a training example with an empty prompt, right? So it's just no instructions, just like, hey, like figure out the sequence of tokens essentially, right? And what is starting to happen now is that, yeah, the writing style is different, right? The model does not write in a typical that corporate AI-like style, but it's actually starting to write or sound like Gary Halbert. Now, ideally, what we would do is we would take a specific writing style, let's say all of Gary Halbert's letters, let's say that's 10,000, 100,000 words, fine-tune a model, ideally that would be GPT-4, right? So we essentially teach the model, hey, this is how the tokens should follow each other, right? Literally update the writing style. And then we would fine-tune that fine-tuned model on instruction following, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. At the moment, we can't fine-tune GPT-4, although OpenAI said that it will become available in 2024, early 2024. And also they said we currently can't, we used to be able to like fine-tune a fine-tuned model, but we also can't do that anymore. For some reason, when GPT 3.5 became available for fine-tuning, they took away that feature. So that's a bit unfortunate, but yeah.
So just to explain EntryPoint AI from what I understand is that it helps you fine-tune different models, including GPT-3 Turbo, 3.5 Turbo. Is that correct? Yeah. And so, and the challenge has been, if you want to do that, you have to do that through the programming interface. But actually, you guys have built so that anyone can build it in an interface, including a non-technical person, a bit like a GPT, but it's the same sort of thing. So I'd love to, if you to explain about EntryPoint and start to show us how to build a model and so on. If yes, over to you, maybe Mark.
Yeah, the idea for EntryPoint is that it's a layer on top of other startups and APIs that have already handled the GPUs and that sort of low-level hardware stack. And so they did that work. Great. They have APIs. Sure, you could write a Python script and you could format your data and you could submit it and run it fine-tune. On EntryPoint, we've created integrations for these services, and you can manage your data set in EntryPoint. We help you with a lot of really basic stuff like counting tokens, estimating costs. And then you can run your fine-tune on different providers with different models, and then compare them kind of apples to apples. But your model lives on the underlying platform like OpenAI. So you have complete access to it. You're not gated whatsoever through EntryPoint. We just provide this really useful layer to make it easy. And that way you can iterate faster. You can invite your team members, collaborate as a team, test different things, see what works. And also, we also have data synthesis tool to increase the size of your data set, and like evaluation tools, so you can reserve some examples to validate your results and see if the model is generating what you want it to generate or to what level of quality. Yeah, and do all those things.
Yeah, a good way to think about it is that EntryPoint is a project management platform for AI fine-tuning, essentially, right? It's like a central hub. It's very visual. Anyone can use it, right? Because the basis, if prompt writing is the basis for prompt engineering, then creating training data sets like prompt example, right? Like prompt completion, that's the basis for fine-tuning, right? It's very show, don't tell. And if you don't have this tool, then you would have to collect all of your examples in different spreadsheets and then download those as CSV files and translate them into JSON-L files before you send them off to different platforms for fine-tuning, each with their own different API call, right? So EntryPoint, what it does, it simply is an interface where everyone can join, add examples in a very visual way. It's very, pretty easy to use for anyone. And then, the integration is also very seamless. Just have to have the API key essentially, and then you can have the same example data set and just with one click send it off to OpenAI, send it off to Replicate, send it off to Gradient and all different large language model providers essentially.
It's easy to test it across different platforms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No problem.
We actually just launched Replicate and Gradient integrations today, which allows Llama to find open source fine tuning. So
just a quick question on the different models. Which ones are catching up? GPT-4, do you think?
I don't think anything compares to GPT-4.
That's my gut feeling. And yeah.
Claude, they don't have fine-tuning APIs available for it. So we're limited in that respect. I mean, on the prompt engineering side, I can't comment. In terms of fine-tuning, I found Llama 2 they have these parameter efficient fine-tuning techniques. It's much more technical, and I appreciate more than ever how easy OpenAI has made these things to do. They don't reveal what they do on the back end of their APIs to like make the model perform well, but it's very responsive to fine-tuning examples, and I love it. AI21 is honestly similar. Not many people talk about their Jurassic 2 models, but I think they have a great fine-tuning API, and it's a great alternative to OpenAI to experiment with. So
great. Do you want to show us into EntryPoint?
I'd love to. All right. Got my screen?
Got your screen.
Okay. Let's take a quick look into some of the examples I mentioned. So this is the EntryPoint dashboard. I have different projects. So I created a different project for each use case. I have the gallery tagger, which I mentioned for Simple Booth. Those are our photo galleries. It generates tags for them for the content. And then we have a blog generator, which I'll show you too. So the gallery tagger, the data set, it's 489 examples. And essentially in EntryPoint, what you do is you create, we help you structure your data. So you create a field for sort of variable. Or if you have like a spreadsheet of data, think of this as each of your columns is going to become a field. And then each of your rows is going to become an example. And you can actually import a CSV and create a project that way. But here, like in our system at Simple Booth, we have different values like the gallery title, the hashtag, the email address of the user, the name of the company, the number of uploads, and then the output, the completion is the tags. So we just want a comma separated list of tags. That's what we can most effectively use in our system. And then we'd apply these in our database.
So am I right in thinking the prompt is the inputs and the tags are the output, the completion?
Pretty much. So you start with those as your sort of input data. And within a template, so we provide this template feature to craft the language around the inputs. So here it's very simple. It's like one on each line, but you could add labels. You could do a little prompt engineering in here, essentially. And then the output, we have a label for the tags. So this is very similar to if you've ever done email marketing, when you want to insert somebody's first name, it's like you use this name. It's called the handlebars templating language. So, so then I won't show you all the data in this project because I did use everybody's email address, so it'll be a little weird. But you can select a fine-tuned model in our playground. And then we have this handy dandy feature called synthesis. So you can generate some fake data for your prompt. So you don't even have to think about a prompt to test it with. So we're using some prompt engineering here to create like sample data, essentially.
Yep.
And this is also with prompt engineering. But then using our fine-tuned model with just these inputs. And so having structured data is helpful because then you can have this sort of like a form. You press generate and you get like a simple, like that was blazingly fast. Using our fine-tuned model, we just get one.
Gosh, yeah, that's fast. Yeah.
So the party. It's pretty easy. So other examples where this is helpful is like with weddings, for example, they don't all say wedding, because if you're just trying to write some code that wrote tags for things, you'd maybe have a list of keywords and you try to like cross-reference your fields with some keywords like, oh, this has the word wedding in it, so we'll tag it as wedding. And that's cool, but it breaks down very quickly because like if Joe and Sally is the name of the gallery title and the hashtag is getting hitched, it's like there's no company and there's like 80 photos in it. It doesn't have the word wedding anywhere in it. So how is our code algorithm going to figure out this is a wedding? A large language model can do it very easily. Yeah, just based on
your training data will be, it will be all these different prompt entries and then the output tag, and that will be under the in your example section, but you can't show us because it's got private data in there, of course. Yeah, but I guess we'll see it in a different example. But
yeah, I'll strip the email out of the template.
So you're showing us the outputs that's coming from the training, but I think that the training will be interesting to see.
Here's all the examples without email addresses.
Got it. Yeah, nice. So you put these in. Yeah, got it.
Yep. Here's my label for it, my tags output.
And you call this training data, or you call it examples? What's the right way of explaining that?
Both are good. We use the term examples, but it's your training data. So
you can see why this is very different to GPTs, actually, can't you?
Yeah.
It's just, much more accurate.
It's a different experience. Like it's a different workflow. The blog generator is my favorite. So this one I've trained on 37 examples of past blogs. And how I actually did this was I converted the blog into Markdown format, which uses these little symbols. And we can actually see it formatted here. So like like these subheadings, they get made bigger because they have these hashtags in front of them. And then what I did was I took our blogs. So I have all the outputs, right? This is a common problem, is like people have the outputs they like, but they don't have the inputs to like what they would want to generate it from. So I used ChatGPT I pasted each of these in and with a prompt that was like, turn this into really, I think I said like really crummy or really rough, bad notes that are sort of incomplete, but have all the facts that a writer would need. Like if you were really busy and you hired a writer to write a blog post for you and you did a stream of consciousness writing rough notes to them, that's kind of the vision I had, was like, that's what I would want to do if I wanted to get a good blog output from it.
So for example, for me, I do loads of dictation. So I could put my dictations in there which are just a mess. And then I do dictations and I do a couple of chats and I dump it all in. And then I I could put all that in as an input and then put the finished blog post as an output.
That's a great thing for you to start doing, like as you go, right? Because creating these fine-tuning jobs, you need a big training data set. The problem is, you can't just sit down one day and create like 100 dictations and then 100 newsletters. It's just inconvenient. So what you can do is, as you go, right, save everything that you create, save your first draft, save your first dictations, right? Save everything. And then you can simply, as you go, build out your training data set. And over time, let's say you have 100 dictations saved and 100 polished newsletters that, come from that dictation, you can teach a model to essentially do that.
people who to take that step and then start doing that now, and then a month or two down the line, start creating this content so easily
Yeah,
because they did the upfront work will have a huge advantage, and no one will actually know they're doing it.
yeah,
People will be saying, "Oh, GPT-4 doesn't do that," and you'll be like, "No, it doesn't." But it's not GPT-4; it's a whole bunch of work that I've done for the last couple of months.
exactly.
Yep. Here's a little look into the fine tunes, starting like what it looks like to start a fine tune. So I showed you some of the blog articles, and now unless I have enough examples, which let's say 20 to 50 is a good range to start playing with, I can just hit the plus button here, and then I can choose a platform. I have these two set up right now. I can choose what model I want to do.
You just connect, you put your API keys in the back in the settings here, get somewhere, and
Yeah, exactly, under the integrations tab. So I
yeah,
have
you got all your different, yeah.
boom. It'll count all my tokens. It'll estimate my cost. It's like under $1, right?
Is that cost to make the fine tune?
Yeah.
Gosh, so it's $1 to make it. The cost to actually run it must be tiny. Yeah.
Yeah, the cost to run it, I think, is it's like 3 cents for. They've just lowered it. It's very reasonable to run it as well with GPT 3.5 Turbo. And you hit start, and then we package it up as a JSON-L file based on your template with all your examples. We send it to the OpenAI API. We initiate the fine tune with your parameters, and then it'll start. And I could just as easily run one here if I want to compare on AI 21, which is also going to cost $1, except they require 50 examples. So I guess I can't.
Right. Not on that one.
Yeah. And then I have some completed here. So this one, like, we show you which template you used for it so that you can tweak your template and use that as another way to improve performance. If I had validation examples in the data set, they would be listed here, and I could manually rank them and come up with a score for the model that could compare to other models. But we'll go ahead and try it in our playground. So for this one, say like we want to like make a photo booths for, I don't know, holiday parties, and then why you should have a photo booth. Yeah, move my microphone here to type. At your holiday party, it's lots of fun. Everyone loves it. They share the photos on social media with your hashtag. Lots of smiles, entertainment.
He's giving it a stream of consciousness, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chuck all your ideas in and
holiday backdrop. Set up a props table and get to your phone instantly. All right, photo booth. Maybe we'll do how to set up simple booth for holiday parties.
And the settings, the gold crow is your model name that your fine-tuned model name.
Yeah, we just generate automatic names so you can distinguish them, but you can rename them, of course.
Got it.
It's GPT 3.5 Turbo. For generation tasks like this, I like a higher temperature. It kind of makes the output a little longer too. So temperature is this field that kind of determines how crazy the model gets. If you set it to 0, it always selects the next most likely token. It's actually deterministic. So if you send the same prompt with 0 temperature, you always get the same output. And then as you increase the temperature, it'll just get more, it's like a proxy for creativity in terms of what we'll come up with.
So the lower, the less creative, the higher, the more creative.
It's also more likely to make things up as the temperature goes up, which sometimes you want because you want to get ideas from it.
So temperature-wise, what would you go up to here? What would be the maximum?
For OpenAI, their max temp is 2, I believe.
Right.
But I usually don't go above 1.
And the max tokens, is that input tokens, output tokens, or?
Max tokens is for the output. Yeah, so we kind of autofill it based on your example set.
And what's the rough sort of guide of tokens per word?
I think it's like,
I think 1,000 tokens is like 750 words.
yeah,
Okay.
it's gonna say 4 to 3 or something.
Yeah.
So here we go. Like,
This
it's
is
got a title. It's got an intro, use some emojis. Every party should have a photo booth. It's got a little bit of personality, which is probably coming from the training data because I didn't tell it to have personality. And then yeah, the subtitles, set up a holiday party backdrop, props table, download the app. So that one, I didn't tell it to do that.
no, it's good.
It actually,
call to actions.
I left all the links in my training data, so it'll come up with fake links, which is kind of amusing. Do fake hyperlinks that don't go anywhere. So I can either strip them out or use it as kind of an idea.
Well, I think that get simple both one is correct.
It might be. That is actually.
Yeah.
But basically, if I don't like it, it's super cheap. I'll just like, run another one.
It's gone.
Yeah, and keep in mind that
is it saved somewhere?
Yeah, so we have a completion, and you can view all your past completions. And if you really like it, you can actually just add it to your data set directly from within EntryPoint.
Oh, right. Okay. So you can then recycle it back in.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking if I was doing that in GPT-4, in ChatGPT, I would do the notes, and then I would have to give it the context of the company. Then I have to give it the context of the output. Then I'd say had to have a call to action. Then I'd say something else, and I still wouldn't get an output as good as that. I mean, we could try that, but I mean, I think it would be interesting to try that. But I don't think it would be as good as that.
Yeah, and keep in mind that this is a 3.5 model, technically, right? It's a fine-tuned 3.5. It's not even GPT-4.
No.
Yeah, so this one I increased the temperature a little bit and it's a lot longer. And it just kept going and adding sections, which what I like to do is get ideas from a section and then kind of adjust my notes.
All right.
And then just run it again. And it's a very fast iterative cycle. So
you recycle the best parts back into the notes, back into the prompt. It gets better and better just by cut, paste, generate.
Exactly.
Iterating of your content.
Yep. And I think that in general it does pretty good at matching the style from the other blog posts. So I've been happy with like the style and tone of it. Sometimes the content isn't always very good, but then it's very cheap and fast to just generate another one. And with less than 10 generations, I'll usually find one that's I'm pretty happy with, or I can kind of merge two together. So
is there another case study that you can quickly run through that you think is, as impressive as this?
I also have a press release generator. So if you've ever had to write a press release for like your startup or something, which maybe isn't as common anymore, but like it's kind of like I hate it. I don't want to do it. It's very like they're very boring, and I don't know how to really write a press release anyway. Like, and I don't want to hire a press release writer, so I thought it'd be cool to have a model that did this. So this one was trained on 20 examples. And I just pulled these off the internet from best press release blogs. And here is my latest version of that. So we'll try it in the playground. So we could make up, this one takes a list of facts, where each fact is on its own line. So I don't know, let's say the Boost AI newsletter is bought by Google. Tim O'Shea started the Boost in 2023.
for a couple of.
What are some what are some other facts?
That means it wasn't a lot.
um, yeah, what else can we say about the boost?
Uh,
Over 100,000, over 100 million subscribers joined the boost newsletter in November after featuring EntryPoint AI. And
are we hallucinating there?
a little bit. Okay.
Does it make quotes up as you go as well? I guess it. Well, we'll see. We'll see what it does.
Make facts up.
Quotes, as in.
Oh, quotes. It will make quotes up. If you so I started changing my training data so that I included some quotes in the inputs, so that it would use those quotes in the outputs. So it really depends on what you want. Like, do you want a model that makes up quotes and then you go get a real quote and replace it, or like see if the person would actually sign off on the quote that it made up, or if you want to get the quotes ahead of time. But
Right. So you can set up as you wish.
Great storytelling and relevant. Let's see. Relevant and timely information. Okay. Let's see if this is enough. I don't know if that's enough facts to go on. Maybe we'll increase the temperature just so it will make up more facts.
Make up some more things.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's interesting there that we waited around 3 or 4 seconds, I guess, before the completion came through.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Fast. It's fast. If we're sitting there in GPT-4 Turbo, we'd be still waiting, wouldn't we? We'd be looking at it and thinking.
I mean, that's another cool thing about fine-tuning a smaller model to do the task, is it you get the speed and costs go down. So the Boost AI, a beloved and influential tech newsletter with millions of subscribers. GV, maybe that's Google Ventures. I don't know why it came up with that, but
cool.
You know, got the format right, came up with a date here. We could say we can actually fix that, like by providing more facts up front. And then it included this about the boost at the bottom, which I guess press releases do.
So if you were in a news desk marketing department of a big company and you're sitting there manually writing news release, press releases, and you go into ChatGPT and it's still going all over the place. For this, you build your own model, you put your data in, it gets it right. You put the temperature to a number that you know is correct, and it just works.
Yeah.
Every time.
Well, that's generating. I think it's probably going a little wild here with a long one. I'll show you the examples. So I have a fairly longer list of facts here for some of these. And again, these facts were created, like reverse engineered from the output. I found the output online, and then I used a prompt to generate the list of facts from it, like extract all the facts from this article that a writer would need to get it right. And then we have these real press releases, and there's just 20 of them. So this took less than an hour for me to make, honestly. The template is really simple. I included a system prompt, because with small example sets, this can help to include that in the training data and when using it to get completions, and then just simple labels for the facts and the press release.
Am I right in thinking as well, if you're working through the OpenAI API, anything you put in here is safer than working through ChatGPT in terms of sharing data and so on?
That's a great point. They do not use API data for retraining their models.
So if you're from a company that can't get access to ChatGPT Enterprise, you're going to ChatGPT plus your data is going in there, and you can't put personal things in because it's gone. And so through here, your own models, you can keep it safe.
Yeah, you can be confident that they're not going to like put it in their training data set, at least, or if your company allows it through the API, then
that's a fundamental difference, isn't it, for people who actually want a no code style prompt engineers who want something that is corporate company ready, company secure. You can actually use fine tuning.
Yeah, and with open source models, you can actually download the weights and you can run it anywhere.
Right.
That is, if you can get it to work. We haven't published our guides yet on Llama 2, but it's a little more difficult, let's say.
Excellent. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you are excited about in the world of AI, in the world of EntryPoint, in the world of what you guys are working on for the future that you'd like to share?
Yeah.
Well, I'm most excited about the opportunity for fine-tuning GPT-4 and fine-tuning our fine-tuned models. That's just going to open up so many more possibilities in terms of like what we can do with this. So yeah, anytime that perhaps you would have a problem with prompt engineering in terms of like speed or cost or reliability of the output, or just the quality of the output that you're not happy with, right? If you're working on a project, and this sometimes happens, right? And you are working with, let's say, your intuition and perhaps decades of experience, right? You can't really, in creating content or in classifying certain content leads, for example, and so on, you can't really write instructions because you don't even know what you're doing consciously, right? That's probably a fundamental problem that not enough people talk about. Like, what if you simply can't write instructions because it's your own intuition that you're working with, right? Well, you know, a fine-tuned model is a perfect solution or a workaround, right? Because you are not writing any instructions. You're just providing examples of your work, of your quality work. And the model itself during the fine-tuning process will pick up on your intuitive patterns, essentially, and then replicate those in the output, right? So anytime, let's say if you are calling the model through the API, not so much through ChatGPT, I suppose, you might have problems with speed and price, right? Because if you're calling the model to the API, you get billed by the number of tokens that you send in the prompt and the number of tokens you get back in the completion. So of course you want to shorten the prompt as much as possible. And with fine tuning, you can bake your instructions in the model so that you can save some cost there. Plus you're usually using lighter models like 3.5, which are naturally less expensive. So that's one way. And if you are not happy with the quality, you simply can't. No matter how hard you try with prompt engineering, you simply can't get the model to do what you want it to do. I would consider, fine-tuning your own model. And then you can continue with prompt engineering, prompt tweaking on your fine-tuned model, right? On your own model that you have created.
I think the point about that you can put your examples in, because what I see is you see people who are really good at using ChatGPT and people say it doesn't work. And the ones who say it doesn't work, you could just say, okay, give me all the examples. We'll fine tune it. It works. You haven't got to be a creative prompt engineer or type of a builder to get a result. You can just put the data in. But I'm just intrigued. Fine tuning. What is that possible? And what does that do?
Well, so this was possible before 3.5 became available for fine tuning, right? I mean, essentially, GPT-4 that we have right now was fine-tuned from a previous version. So let's say 3.5, right? So it's always like OpenAI, what they're doing is every few months, they just gather more training data and then they train their previous version of the model on that new data, right? So it's a continual process, like an evolution. And currently, what we have available, let's say we can, at the moment, select 3.5, the base 3.5 model, and we can run a fine-tuning job and have another version of a fine-tuned version of that base model. We had the option with DaVinci, Babbage, Curie, and Ada. We could create a fine-tuned model from those base models, and then we could run another fine-tuning job on those fine-tuned models, right? So we could chain them together. So that's pretty exciting. One of the use cases for this would be it's called pre-training, essentially. We would take, let's say in the future, what I'm most excited about, taking a GPT-4, pre-training it on, let's say some domain specific text, let's say from like I don't know, like physics, right, for example, or any type of just some legal text, perhaps, right? So we pick up on the terminology and the writing style, and then we create another fine-tuned model on top of that, that we can then create technically our base fine-tuned model and then create multiple fine-tuned models from that for specific use cases, right? So that's going to be very, very exciting.
Yeah, like imagine if at EntryPoint we found a bunch of the best blog articles on the internet and we trained a generic blog article writer, and then we made that available, and then you just added a few more of your blogs, and so we fine-tuned GPT 3.5 or GPT-4 on writing blogs, and then like you fine-tuned it on writing your style of blogs, and then you could see like, does that work better than just fine-tuning it directly on one larger data set? There's a lot of ways to slice and dice it and combine it. I think back to your previous question about what we're excited about. What I'm excited about is I think 2023 is the year of the chatbot, and maybe with custom GPTs, like it's going to be like the year of the custom chatbot next year. But I'm really excited about use cases outside of conversation. I love ChatGPT and using the conversational interface, but I think it's like really consumed everyone's attention. And I think there's a ton of applications for like really more specialized use cases where you just get back what you want. And maybe that's plugged into an automation, whether it's Google Sheets. We show people how to use fine-tuned models in Google Sheets to like transform their data on the fly, or label things, categorize things. Just really like business practical applications for large language models that become an integrated part of your workflows and processes. I'm excited about that.
Yeah,
that makes.
So essentially, like to my point before, like we're storing intuition in these models, right? Which means that, say a year ago, when we were doing business automation, we really had to only rely on logic and code, right? We had to spot patterns inside a string of text. If those patterns weren't present, we couldn't execute the automation, right? Because we couldn't pick up on the pattern. Well, now with AI, we're not dealing with patterns in the string of text. We're dealing with the pattern of concepts that the string of text infers, right? So we now have human level decision making in our code and automations. And people don't even really realize that. Like, what does that mean? Like, that's
I think
that
there is
would simply take like business automation to next level. And like people are just scratching the surface at the moment with that sort of use case.
It feels like in the chat interface, people just trying to work out what it can do. And sometimes it works, sometimes they butt heads, it doesn't work. But you're kind of saying, Mark, that next year the use cases will go behind the scenes. There'll be APIs behind the scenes doing all sorts of things that you don't even know it's happening. And that's actually, these LLMs are powering all sorts of interesting decisions and logic that's in there, but isn't, as you say, Michal, that's not coded in the code. It's just intuition based. So fantastic. So yeah, where can people find out more about EntryPoint and how to follow you guys on social media? Whereabouts can they find you? And
we're both active on LinkedIn. So Mark Hennings and Mihail. What's your LinkedIn?
That's right, Mihail Tsatsits.
And then entrypointai.com.
Brilliant. Well, appreciate your time today. It's absolutely fascinating. I learned loads. It's great fun. And I wish you guys all the best in 2024. I'm sure it will be, well, I'm fingers crossed it's the year of the fine tune.
Yeah, so do we.
It was a lot of fun. It was a pleasure. Thanks, Tim.